Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Most welcome to today's session. This is session number 3. It is a quality track, and we have seen two best sessions for the last 2 days. Session 1 was on regulatory agilities. 2 was on post-approval changes, touching upon reliance, convergence, harmonization, and risk-based approaches. The theme of today is delivering products with same quality standards, patients everywhere or anywhere. We envisage and we plan to obtain explanation on how actually the supply chain complexity exists in today's world, and how companies create and maintain complex global supply chains, which actually ensure global quality standards and efficient product delivery every time. And we also plan to showcase different national strategies for quality control of pharmaceutical products. And at this juncture, actually, just briefly cover the overview of the today's session. Today's sessions will be held in 2 parts. Part one is actually covering the supply chain, GMP standards, and product sameness. It describes global pharmaceutical supply chain, its complexity and systems in place to ensure robustness, and also the importance of reliance and work sharing, and leveraging on what we learned actually for the past 2 days in what's an effort, actually global effort towards more efficient regulatory landscape or frameworks, and then and how to ensure, both as a regulator or a companies, ensure the product sameness around the world, and also to alleviate some of the misconception about the product, about the product sameness is also will be touched upon. And this part 1 will be actually supported by 4 distinguished speakers. And at the end of part 1 is there is a panel discussion. It is actually assisted by the moderator, Mike Saleh from Pfizer. And then we have a panel number, actually part 2. Part 2 actually covers the overview of national quality control strategies. And then this is covering registration testing, import testing, post-market monitoring, etc. How the quality control testing strategies are set up in a way that it optimizes the time and resources, of course, without compromising on the patient safety or the quality or safety of the product. And also it touches upon part 2 of this session, touches upon collaboration and work sharing in the area of quality control. And this session is actually supported by 3 distinguished speakers. And we have a moderator to help us to run this panel discussion. This is Yog Cobb from Roche. With that, I think we get started. And before starting, actually, there is an admin announcement for the benefit of those who are actually joining for the first time today. And that's just briefly about this conference will be held in English. And then we encourage everyone to use Q&A box to raise questions. And also you have an opportunity to actually like the questions, yeah. And there will be opportunity for participant to actively participate using the Mentimeter, and the QR code will be displayed on the screen, and then you can use that to participate in the and to answer the questions, give your vote for the different options of the Mentimeter, yeah. And finally, all the conference presentations and videos will be recorded and will be made available to all the participants on IFPMA website. With that, we'll get started with the first talk. First talk is by Dr. Chaitanya Koduri from from USP. He's the Director for Global External Affairs. I will not be actually introducing the speakers in detail, just to give more time for the panel discussions and also to ask questions. And Chaitanya, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Dinesh, and for setting the context of today's conversation and also introducing me. Good day, everybody. My name is Dr. Chaitanya Koduri. I work as a Director for International Government and Regulatory Engagement for US Pharmacopoeia. And I'm going to talk about the complexity of the supply chain part of today's discussion. And if you go to the next slide, we will start by a little introduction to where I work, because USP, the US Pharmacopoeia, has been in operation from 1820. So for over 200 years, we have been involved in the standard setting process for medicines, food, and dietary supplements. And being a public health organization, we also focus on all the aspects of medicine quality from regulatory health systems to beyond standards. And therefore, we are well equipped and operated globally. And we had the advantage of working with many governments in improving their quality systems. Next slide. So if we looked at the last 16 years data of our own standards use, that gives you a proxy of how the manufacturing has become global. So this is the use of USP standards outside the US in multiple countries. And this standard use is not just supplying for the US, but also for their own domestic markets. And you would see that over the years, the manufacturing has really moved into Asia and Latin America, and how countries have expanded in their manufacturing over the years. And this truly demonstrates how the manufacturing have moved to different parts globally, but also at the same time concentrated in specific regions and countries. And this again, varies from the manufacturing of raw materials to manufacturing finished pharmaceuticals, but also other raw materials which are part of it. And there are many implications of this globalization, that today the medicines that you get are coming from different sources, but also not just medicines, that the various components that are involved in the manufacture of medicines, they come from different places. And if you go to the next slide. So when we looked at the 2019 report of US FDA about the quality of medicines that come to the market of the US, they talked about shortages and listed out various reasons. And you would see that quality issues remain as one of the major problem of shortages. That when you have quality issues, the regulators are forced to either stop the supply or look for an alternate manufacturer to be able to supply those same medicines. So it's important for us in a world where we have emergencies like COVID, we have several other issues like natural calamities and climate-related events, which continue to strain the supply chain. And if we have to look at various components and addressing them, quality continues to remain at the forefront. Next slide. So USP has over 7,000 standards, and this really is the broadest number of standards we have in many of the global pharmacopoeias. So in today's world, when there are more than 193 countries, there are a handful of pharmacopoeias, nearly 50, but 20 around has the capability of ensuring standards across their essential medicine list. It is therefore natural for many countries to depend on each other and depend on global pharmacopoeias to sustain their pharmaceutical needs. But because I'm coming from a pharmacopoeia, I'm also giving pharmacopoeia as an example of the systems that are in place globally to ensure that wherever manufacturing happens, they happen through the same way. For example, the quality standards that we manufacture not only demonstrate the quality of finished products, but also of the quality of API, inactive ingredients like excipients and other raw materials. But you also have standards in packaging, in storage, distribution, how medicines are compounded, how they're labeled. So from raw materials to the production and throughout the supply chain, Standards enable that consistency and uniformity. And no matter where the medicines are produced, where they are manufactured, you have the same system of quality, not just for the manufacturers, but also for approving regulators. You have a similar system to rely on. And by having the broad set of standards, which can be used by multiple stakeholders across the globe, we are in a way enabling a multi-manufacturing environment that makes it easy for access and approval of new medicines. Next slide. So now we have seen so far that the medicines are manufactured everywhere, but you can establish systems that enable the approval and manufacture of medicines globally. But there are still issues that needs to be addressed. Today, if you talk about transparency, when people who want to buy medicines, who want to procure medicines, look at the information, most of the time, such decisions of buying medicines happen based on the drug price. But we all know today that whether it's shortages occurring due to quality or whether it's pandemic affecting supply chain resilience, it is increasingly important for manufacturers to look at their own quality systems, to look at their own resilience of supply chain, so that in the future, when there are shocks, you should have that ability. But that incentive doesn't just exist with the manufacturer, that it's the responsibility of every stakeholder that is part of the supply chain to take into consideration not just price, but manufacturer's ability to produce quality and to ensure that supply as additional factors that needs to be considered while making that decision, so that we can incentivize manufacturers not just by looking at the cost, but also considering quality and resilience. And that's one of the significant ways we would ensure the future of medicine supply chains, if you are balancing the decision making based on not just the cost, but also considering both quality and supply chain resilience that the manufacturers enable. Next slide. So we talked about trust in the quality systems. We talked about prioritizing on quality and supply chain resiliency beyond the cost. But there is also another aspect of transparency that we should talk about. Today, when medicines are manufactured globally, the processes, the manufacturing processes are entirely different even for the same medicines, even for the same APIs. The key starting materials that might be used might be different. So the different pockets of information is looked at and available for different stakeholders. For example, if you are a regulator, if you are a country importing medicines, you would look at some of your essential medicines. If you're a manufacturer, you would look at what is required in your own supply chain. But globally, when you bring that all together, it's a complex network of information asymmetry, and such lack of information in the supply chain makes it difficult when there needs to be flexibility in looking for an alternate supplier. So one of the things that is needed to increase the transparency as to strengthen the supply chain. So organizations like USP, we have invested in increasing the transparency, and Medicine Supply Map is one of the result of it. If you go to the next slide. So USP created an early warning system that aggregates data from nearly 40 data sets. This is not just our own data of how standards are used, but also proprietary data of pharmaceuticals availability in different parts, and nearly 22,000 locations worldwide where quality of the USP quality standards are used. And when you have a complex network of information like this, and as it becomes more transparently available, it provides you not just information of the shortages of medical products, but such information on availability of raw materials, API, finished products. They can help you identify and quantify the risk that you have for a supply chain when there is a problem of the shortage. And that information is very critical for decision makers like governments, manufacturers, hospitals, even wholesalers to predict in advance potential disruptions, but also prioritize where they have to make investments and development plans so that these shortages can be mitigated. So that's the transparency in the system that is needed. But at the same time, there is another big investment that one has to make is leveraging the new technologies of manufacturing. There are many advanced methods that complement the existing system, but one of the things that USP has been able to focus is continuous manufacturing. If you even talk only about quality issues, with traditional batch manufacturing, if a quality issue comes up, you have to discard the entire batch, wasting time, valuable resources. But with advanced manufacturing technologies like continuous manufacturing, a medicine can be produced from start to finish in just one facility in a continuous process where something like quality monitoring is automated and ensuring the quality of final product without slowing down the production. But it's not easy for something like that to be adopted. And we're not just talking about the initial cost investments in it. There's many other barriers of adoption of advanced manufacturing technology, like there is regulatory uncertainty associated with it. It's new technology, so there needs to be a lot of capacity building in order to use such technologies. And even in the standard space, today's USP scientists are working on developing standards and related programs to address some of those increasing standard requirements for new technologies. And besides continuous manufacturing, there is also technologies like 3D printing, which has their own benefits. So as countries look at local production, as they look at diversifying their manufacturing, they are looking at bringing back the manufacturing to their own countries. And the batch manufacturing is not going to go anywhere, but adopting to newer ways of manufacturing will certainly help in addition to looking at other aspects of supply chain. And again, that adoption requires a cooperation between multiple countries for regulatory collaborations, but also a clarity on how such investments can be made in different places to leverage regional production of medicines. Next slide. So with all these examples, what I'm trying to go is with a complicated supply chain like today's, it's not just essential for us to look at one aspect of a supply chain, because the supply chain inherently is diverse and it has the components beyond manufacturing to focus at, but it also needs to prioritize quality, prioritize supply chain resiliency, and incorporation of new technologies into making this resiliency. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya, for really providing us an insight on the real complex supply chain in today's globalized world in the area of pharmaceutical manufacturing and supply. It's great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Now we'll move on to the second talk. I invite Hilda Dupete from EDQM to give her talk on resilience and collaboration in the area of GMP inspections. Hilda, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me and to give me the opportunity to explain to you the EDQM inspection program and what we are doing with regard to international collaborations and optimizing of inspection resources. If we can go to the next slides, please. The next one, please. So first of all, I would like to explain a little bit about the CEP procedure. What is its place and scope? So the CEP procedure stands for a procedure to obtain a certificate of suitability to the monographs of the European Pharmacopoeia. The procedure is basically an international platform for the assessment of quality of substances for pharmaceutical use and for the coordination and conduction of GMP inspections for API manufacturers. The legal framework for this is embedded in the EU directives. The scope of the procedure is for substances that are described in the European Pharmacopoeia monographs. This could be the active substances, excipients, herbal drugs, and herbal preparations. And also in scope are products with a risk of TSE. And the procedure is open to any manufacturer regardless of its geographical origin. If you go to the next slide, please. So what is not in scope are the substances that are not included in the European Pharmacopoeia: biologicals, human tissue derivatives, blood derivatives, vaccines, the substances which do not comply with the definition section of the monograph, and the finished products. If we go to the next slide, please. So what about then the EDQM inspection program? So the inspection program is an integral part of the certification procedure. So it involves the manufacturing sites and also brokers, distributors holding CEPs, and it's performed either before or after the CEP is granted, but most of the times it's after the CEP is granted. And the aim is to verify the compliance with the submitted CEP dossier, the EU GMP Part 2 and any applicable annexes, and the European Pharmacopoeia in general. If we go to the next slide, please. So each year, the EDQM is drafting its inspection program, and this is done based on a risk-based approach. Yeah, the tool that we are using for that is the site status review process. And a site status review can be done periodically, can be done for cause when there is a specific reason, and will also be done during the life cycle, so also after inspections. The basis of the site status review is a risk assessment where we take into account risks related to the site and risks related to the active pharmaceutical ingredient. If we go to the next slide, please. So once we have drafted the program is circulated to the EU or European Economic Area member states for comments, and it will be presented to the GMP-GDP Inspectors Working Group at the European Medicine Agency. The adopted program is then shared with the EEA member states, and this enables the national competent authorities to align their plans and inspectional resources with the EDQM plans and resources and to participate in the scheme. If we go to the next slide. So for the EDQM, we have 3 pillars for GMP assessment. The main one is, of course, the on-site inspections. So this is the traditional inspection approach. And the EDQM is inspecting approximately 40 sites per year. So this was, of course, before the COVID situation. A second pillar is the documentation-based GMP assessment. So this is complementary to the on-site inspections and to the real-time remote inspections. And this is up and running since 2010. And then the third pillar, which basically has been started during the COVID situation, is the real-time remote inspections. So this is a pillar for the supervision of the GMP compliance of API manufacturers via real-time remote inspections. So using real-time video coverage, basically try to mimic as much as possible an on-site inspection. And this tool has been adopted as a permanent tool in 2022. If we go to the next slide, please. So how does the inspection procedure in itself works then? So the inspections are organized by the EDQM and are always performed by a team composed of 1 EDQM inspector and 1 inspector from an EU, EEA or MRA authority. Also, sometimes we are involved in joint inspections, such as with WHO or US FDA. The local authorities are always informed and invited to participate as observers. And as usual, we issue a list of deficiencies within 6 weeks, and then immediate actions regarding the validity of the SIPs are taken in case of major or critical deficiencies. So if we go to the next slide. So an inspection can have a positive outcome. In that case, a GMP certificate will be issued by the participating inspectorate via the EUDRA GMDP database. If we go to the next slide. If we have a negative outcome, in that case, this is because there are critical and major deficiencies. The holder and manufacturer, they will be notified, and there can be a hearing if requested. The information about suspension and withdrawal of the certificates is published on the EDQM website. The European Pharmacopoeia member states and international partners will be informed. Also, the local inspectorate will be informed, and a statement of GMP non-compliance will be issued by the EEA Inspectorate and will be put on the public database. If we go to the next slide. So what are we doing then in addition to our normal inspections? So what about the international collaboration and the recognition of inspections? So with regard to recognition of inspections, there are two sources that we can use to recognize inspections. First of all, there are the sources of the EEA inspections, and then secondly, the source of inspection reports. If we look at the first case, the EEA inspections. So basically at IDIGWEM, since 2002, there is more or less a general rule that we try to avoid to do inspections in the European Economic Area. We mainly focus on inspections for third countries. But with regard to the economic area, the European Economic Area, what we will do is we will scan the database for GMP certificates. And in most of the cases, a direct recognition will be possible if there is negative information, a non-compliance statement will be issued. With regard to inspection reports, in that case, we can also do a documentation-based assessment. Yeah? And we will evaluate the inspection report from trusted authorities. And with the trusted authorities, we mean that in those countries or for those authorities, there is a high degree of similarity between the European and the authorities' inspection procedures and the GMP standards. We look at the comparison of scope, duration, and the result can be that we accept the outcome and include the site then for reinspection in our framework, but we accept the outcome of the trusted authority. If we go to the next slide. So what else do we do with regard to international collaboration? So the IDIGWEM is an observer in the European Medicine Agency GMP GDP Inspectors Working Group. The senior GMP inspectors meet on a regular basis, approximately 4 times a year. And the group consists of representatives of the GMP inspectorates of the European Economic Area, a representative from the European Commission, and observers from IDIGWEM and the inspectorates of the countries accessing to the EU and that have mutual recognition agreement partner countries. The benefits of being part of this group is that we enhance traceability, oversight and security in the human and veterinary medicine supply chain, that we enhance inspector capacity building at EU and at international level, and that there is information exchange in terms of joint inspections. Also that the utilization of quality assurance procedures are laid down in the compilation of union procedures. If we go to the next slide. So a second pillar of international collaboration is the International Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient Inspection Program. So this is a program to rationalize the international GMP inspections of active pharmaceutical ingredients, active substance manufacturers. The objective of this program is to foster a greater international collaboration and information sharing to help and better distribute the inspection capacity, allow more sites to be monitored, increase the inspectional oversight, and reduce duplication of work. The program is built on an equivalent GMP standards and mutual confidence, and the collaboration is on a voluntary basis and agreement between the participants. So for the IDIGWEM, it means that from our side, plant inspections are always shared with the group on a monthly basis so that we can align the resources. If we go to the next slide, please. And then a third pillar with regard to international collaboration is the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, PICS, which is a non-binding informal cooperative arrangement between regulatory authorities in the field of GMP. So today there are approximately 54 participating authorities coming from all over the world. And also the goal is the harmonizing the inspection procedures worldwide by developing common standards in the field of GMP and by providing training opportunities to inspectors. The goal is also to facilitate the cooperation and networking between competent authorities, regional and international organizations. So also try to work to increase the mutual confidence. The PICS has signed cooperation agreements with 4 organizations, so with the European Medicine Agency, with the IDIQM, with the World Organization for Animal Health, United Nations International Children Emergency Fund, and WHO. If we go to the next slide. So also the PICS, they have a GMP inspection reliance document, have issued a document. And so the document outlines the process for remote assessment of GMP compliance of the overseas facilities and to identify instances where an acceptable level of GMP compliance can be confirmed and assured from the activities of another regulatory authority or authorities without the need for an on-site inspection. So for the IDIQM, this is implemented via assessment of trusted authorities inspection reports. So if we go to the next slide, here we give an overview of the IDIQM inspection figures for the last 3 years. And so basically in 2019, we had 33 on-site inspection. We had 18 GMP recognitions, 2 statements of GMP non-compliance, and we performed 1 distant assessment, so inspected by a trusted authority. In 2020, this changed a little bit because of the COVID situation. So we had 7 on-site inspections in 2020. We had 2 remote inspections, real-time remote inspections. We had 31 GMP recognitions, 4 statements of GMP non-compliance, and we had 17 distant assessments, so inspected by trusted authority. In 2021, this evolved even more. And so here we had 11 real-time remote inspections, 17 GMP recognitions, and 22 distant assessments. And then for the figures for 22, in 22, we started again to doing on-site inspections, but also in addition to that, we have RTMIS and we will have the GMP recognitions and the distant assessments. So if we go to the next slide, basically what we can say is, and as a conclusion, that it is very important for what is very important is that the international collaboration and reliance of the GMP inspections are a key and will be a key in the future for successful inspection programs, and will be key to cover as much as possible as many sites with regard to overseeing the quality of API manufacturing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hilda. It's a great presentation, particularly to see, it's great to see that great deal of collaboration effort, the international collaboration effort is going on between IDIQM, EMA, PICS, and I think it's great to know that. Thank you very much, Hilda. Next, we will move on to the next presentation. That's by WHO. By Marie Valentine. We have heard, those who attended yesterday, we heard her speaking about reliance in the area of post-approval changes. It will be great to hear from you, Marie, today on good reliance practices on the sameness of medicinal product. All yours, Marie.
Thanks a lot. Good day to all, and thank you, Dinesh, for the introduction. So thanks a lot for the organizer for this conference. It's been a very interesting discussion. And as Dinesh said yesterday, we discussed a lot about post-authorization changes. My name is Marie Valentine, and I'm a technical officer in the team Regulatory Convergence and Network at WHO headquarters in Geneva. Next slide, please. So what we're going to look at today is a bit of the definition of sameness within the good reliance practice documents, and also some important points and aspects to consider when assessing sameness. Next slide, please. So as we know, sameness is at the core of reliance approaches. Really, there cannot be a successful reliance approach if we cannot ensure the sameness of product, that the two products have essential characteristics. And by the two products, we mean the one that is received, the application that is received by the relying authority, and the one that was approved or assessed by the reference authority. There is a definition in the good reliance practice documents that indicates that all relevant aspects should be considered. And by all relevant aspects, we mean the qualitative and the quantitative composition, the same strengths, the same pharmaceutical form, the same intended use, the same manufacturing process, the same suppliers of API, and the same quality of all excipients. Next slide, please. So when we look at all these aspects, we realize that there is, unfortunately, there is some difference in requirement, in dossier requirements across the globe, and it's not fully harmonized. However, the supporting data, the safety, efficacy, and quality data should be the same, and the two products should be essentially similar. Any potential differences should be explained upfront, and it's for the NRA, the relying NRA, to decide if they can accept and that they will assess these differences. We know that the role of the manufacturer is essential here because the manufacturer are the ones that know their products best in terms of confirming the sameness and in terms of sending the same documentation to different authorities. So it's very important for the industry to be upfront and to highlight any differences. And also we know that additional country-specific information have to be submitted, for example, in terms of different stability zone and local labeling. If we want to use reliance through the life cycle and for post-authorization changes or vigilance, it's important to look at the sameness and to try to maintain the sameness as much as possible to facilitate any reliance approaches. Next slide, please. So what about the manufacturing site? When we look at the definition of sameness, we have to consider what is the intent and what is the purpose of the reliance approach. And in many cases, is to facilitate the work of the relying NRA. And so there's an expectation that the sameness of product cover the same manufacturing site. If we look, for example, at the WHO collaborative registration procedure, in that procedure, we really define the sameness as with the same manufacturing site. We know that we discussed yesterday some new paradigm in changing the way we look at post-authorization changing through the pharmaceutical quality system. But for the moment, we still have to work with the current system, and a new manufacturing site constitutes a variation and needs to be assessed. So it's for the NRA to decide and to assess the impact on the new manufacturing site. So, and two very important aspects have to be controlled, as mentioned by my colleague also from EDQM, the GMP compliance of the new site, and also what is the impact of the new site on the products, and is the product still the same? Next slide, please. So this is just to illustrate on the example from the WHO collaborative registration procedure. So in that case, to highlight the pre-qualification is a system in place to facilitate procurement of quality products globally. And it's also to help through the CRP to help some of the NRAs that do not have the regulatory capacity maybe to control all the products. So to facilitate their work and to facilitate the in-country registration. So for this, it's very important to ensure that all the key quality attributes are the same. And here we define the quality and quantitative composition, the same manufacturing site, the same specification, the essential elements for product information, and the packaging. So again, the intention here is to facilitate, to provide quality products to globally, and to also to help building capacity. The countries have 90 days to accept and authorize the product. And in most cases, for the pre-qualification CRP, this happens. So obviously, within this short time, they cannot assess some very different manufacturing site, for example, that would have also an impact of the intent of the procedure. So what would advise if there is a new site is to first register it with pre-qualification or with the stringent regulatory authorities to then pick and choose which sites they want to use for target countries. Next slide, please. So I think there is not, defining sameness is a difficult exercise, and we cannot be too prescriptive and we cannot be too strict. However, what we want to highlight is there are two aspects. Reliance can always be used. So there's always potential for using reliance in terms of using some part of the assessment in terms of efficacy, safety, quality assessments. But when we look at the sameness of product for the quality side, it's very important to define if there is some additional assessment required. So we always have to look at the sameness of product and clearly identify any differences. The NRAs will have to look at what are the differences and what is the impact. Can I still use the assessment from the reference authority? What do I need to reassess if there are some differences? And also to highlight the importance of ensuring GMP compliance of all the sites. So the message here is that we can always use reliance, but sameness helps us to define what additional review or assessment is required for this application. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide explaining the key concept of reliance from on the left side, where historically the NRAs were working very independently with independent assessment, evaluation, independent inspection, and we can see that there is a certain level of duplication there. If we move to the middle of the slide, where there is a more collaborative effort with work sharing or average pathway, we can see by leveraging the work of others, there is less duplication, and also the workload of the regulators is less. And then on the right side is recognition, when it's a more formalized way of reliance, when one country decides to recognize the decisions of others. And here, if we want to apply the sameness, for example, when we talk about recognition, it's very important to talk about the same products. And for all the work sharing and average pathway, to define the sameness of the product and to see what additional assessment is required. Next slide, please. So just a few take-home messages. As we know, it's very essential. So for any reliance approaches, verification of sameness always has to be applied. We've had some cases, unfortunately, where some reliance approaches were used, and we were not talking about the same product or the same supply chain or the same manufacturing sites and supply chain. So it's very important to verify the sameness of products and to identify the differences upfront. Sameness is defined as two products having identical essential characteristics. For most of the reliance approach, when we are trying to facilitate the work, it is expected that the manufacturing site will be the same. But as we said, we can still use reliance, even if the manufacturing site is not the same. The definition of sameness will help the NRA. So to look at, to pin down what is similar and what do I need to assess? What extra evaluation do I need to apply for this application? And any difference should be explained upfront. And it's for the NRA to decide if they can accept or if they, and what additional assessments is needed for this specific application. And with that, next slide, please. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any question, and I'm sure we'll have some very interesting discussion because it's not an easy topic. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Marie. This is yet complex, yet simple. How you call that this topic, sameness, and then acceptability of sameness, and the trust and the reliance is a great topic, hot topic. And then thank you so much for giving insightful and in-depth discussion. Your thoughts on this topic is really, thank you so much, Marie. And before I go on to the next speaker, I would like to ask the participants to start sending the questions in Q&A option in the Zoom, because I see we have 429 participants. I see only 4 or 5 questions. Yeah. So soon after the next presentation, we're going to start the panel discussion. And to facilitate that, I think please send in your questions. Thank you very much. We will move on to the next presenter. He's going to talk about the importance of product sameness in the context of regulatory reliance, and again, strengthening the thoughts and insights from Marie. And that's from Mike Saleh. He's the Director, Regional Regulatory Advisor for Russia, Turkey, East Europe, and he's from Pfizer. Thank you, Mike, all yours.
Thank you, Dinesh. I have a cold, so my voice is not very clear. I'll try to stay close to the laptop. Thanks again. Again, I'll be talking about the sameness. The message I will bring to the team here is not different than the message that Marie has presented, but I'm going to look at the sameness aspect from a different angle, with more in depth into its impact on our supply chain and our dossier maintenance. I'll start my talk today by definition of the sameness as per WHO. Move on to the key issues related to the sameness, and the two key issues that we mostly face in the industry are the manufacturing supply chain, and the second one is the dossier content. In this respect, I'll be talking about what we call dossier lag, and then I move on to the IFPMA paper or a white paper that's titled Points to Consider, and it's all related to sameness and in terms of reliance, and then bring out the takeaway message for everyone. Next slide, please. Again, the sameness of the product means that two products from the SRA and the NRA have identical essential characteristics. We talk here about the same qualitative, quantitative composition, same strength, same pharmaceutical form, same manufacturing process, same suppliers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, and the same quality of all excipients. Next one, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. The key issue, the sameness topic, as Marie mentioned, continues to be a delicate issue between multinational companies and regulators in many countries. The key issues are, number one, linking the sameness of product to manufacturing supply chain. The second one is linking sameness of the product to the dossier content. And the third one is the continued assurance of sameness of products to regulators throughout the life cycle of the product. Here, we're not talking about sameness to achieve an approval of a product. We're talking about sameness to make sure that we have a product, and we have a product that is continually available to the patients in the globe. Next slide, please. In terms of link to manufacturing supply chain, as we all know, the supply chain deliver medicinal products to the globe is very complex network. In multinational companies, utilize multiple sites to avoid medicinal product shortages resulting from natural disasters, or shortages resulting from human induced disasters, etc., and ensure product continuity to the global patients. So we talk here about flexibility and continuity when we talk about multiple sites. The idea of multiple sites is not to introduce different sites operating under different standards. All sites within any multinational company are operating under the same quality standards and operating under what's stated in ICH related to pharmaceutical quality systems, ICH guidance, quality guidance 11. Minor manufacturing adjustments may occur without impacting product. I'm sorry, ICH 10, not ICH 11. Minor adjustments may occur without impacting product quality or sameness. So when we go to different manufacturing sites, the layout of the equipment is a little bit different. The vendors are a little bit different. If we go to a site in Puerto Rico versus a site in the US, they may use different vendors of raw materials, but yet we get the same quality materials in both sites. Same applies to packaging components, etc. And with all these variables, when we talk about supply chain and our vendors, our vendors also have multiple supply chain or multiple manufacturing sites. All we care about when we get a component from our vendor is that the same quality is produced, whether it's in site A or site B. We have our internal audit teams that always take a look at these changes if a vendor changes something, and also these vendors are or could be inspected by different regulatory agencies from time to time. So there is like measures in place to assure the sameness of the vendor quality excipient or solvent, regardless of where it's manufactured. With all these variables, the product sameness is assured. Next slide, please. In terms of link to the dossier, multinational companies develop products according to ICH guidelines. When we submit a dossier to a country, we give the country what is needed in their dossier as per requirements, no more and no less. The details is always in line with ICH and should be sufficient to ensure the quality of the product described in the dossier. Now, the levels of details may differ between SRA and NRA, but the essential quality attributes are the same. That's how it is linked. I mean, it's assured by these multinational companies. Now, when we talk about a clone dossier, when some NRA demand that they need the same exact dossier as the SRA, it's a misconception that's often leading to what we call dossier lag. And this dossier lag has a negative impact on the supply chain and on the product availability to patients. Next slide, please. Dossier lag occurs when the registration dossier in the NRA is a clone dossier to the SRA or to the approved SRA dossier. Now, as we know, the product continues to evolve throughout its life cycle. And what's important here is not the major changes, the minor changes that are handled differently between the SRA and NRA. When we have a change that is a notification within an SRA requirement or system, this is not the same for NRA. For example, in the US, we have annual report notification. Annual report notification. In EMA, we have type 1A, etc. Some of these changes, the minor changes, are also handled without notifications, and these are handled internally by the quality system. This quality system is often inspected by the regulators. Another point for the SRA regulation that is not in the NRA regulations is like bundled variations. When we have multiple variations or when we're filing the variations in parallel, this is allowed in the SRA regulations. In the NRA, there's less flexibility. We have like the need for change for filing every change separately. There's no room for bundling. The review times are longer, and this creates more burden on the regulators. The result is that the SRA dossier is evolving at a faster rate, and we reach a point when the NRA dossier is not representing or matching the global product. This leads to some shortage of supplies, and this is when we try to put some supplies from the process that is matching the NRA process or dossier aside until their dossier catches up with SRA. Sometimes it leads to discontinuation of the product or unnecessary backlog to regulators. That's where tailoring the dossier is important in this case. Next slide, please. The key message is that the multiple national companies develop their products under ICH guidelines to ensure sameness in the product quality supplied to the globe. We develop one product and market one product for the globe. The level of details may differ But transparency, as Marie has mentioned, is important to show the differences between SRA and NRA dossier and justify these differences. Next slide. I'm going to go briefly around this points to consider from IFPMA, and it relays the same message that's mentioned before. And this paper talks about sameness in terms of manufacturing sites and in terms of dossier. In terms of manufacturing sites, the paper talks about the sameness of product does not mean identical manufacturing sites or suppliers. Marie talked about the details on how we introduce new manufacturing sites. Nobody is slapping a manufacturing site and saying that this is the manufacturing site for country A and this is for SRA, etc. But we follow exactly what we have in the dossier, in the SRA, and file a site with SRA first and then apply it to the NRA. More than one manufacturing site, as mentioned before, is often used to ensure uninterrupted supply of medicinal products. And all these manufacturing sites are operating under one pharmaceutical quality system. Then, as a global system, this pharmaceutical quality system, ensures medicinal products are manufactured to the same quality standards regardless of their market destinations. And any manufacturing changes that are implemented or are supposed to be implemented are to be qualified and validated, and the product comparability should be established before we say the two products are the same and before we decide that this is an alternative manufacturing site or an additional manufacturing site, etc. Next slide, please. In terms of dossier, sameness of product does not mean identical dossier or documentations. The dossier should comply with each jurisdiction of specific to any country. A global harmonized dossier is probably something that everybody is seeking in the future. A global harmonized dossier to contain the essential characteristics of the product, described in a way that's applicable to SRA and applicable to NRA. And the third point is that differences in documentation should not preclude us from using reliance approaches. Also, reliance does not mean that identical indications have to be in the SRA as well as in the NRA. We may have more indications in the SRA or vice versa. But it has to, it's irrelevant to the indications in a certain country. Next slide, please. Now, IFPMA believes that mutual trust between the parties is the foundation for reliance, and transparency is a key principle for good regulatory practice and fundamental to reliance. How can we achieve that? We can achieve that when we, in terms of transparency, we highlight the differences, we address any concerns related to product sameness. We can assure that to the regulators in a cover letter or showing in a side-by-side comparison of in our applications what's different between the dossier with the SRA and the dossier in the NRA. We need to have like more mutual understanding, and this is where workshops around like ICH and ICH training is very important, and to explain to different countries how the pharmaceutical quality system is managed by multinational companies, and how it is inspected and by different regulators and inspectors, and how the product is assured. Last point is in terms of regulatory convergence, and we heard our speakers about like reliance on GMP inspections that Hilda talked about. We talk about PICs. We talk about mutual agreements between different countries to be able to leverage this information without consuming manpower in these NRAs. Next slide. The takeaway messages from this presentation is that sameness of the product means identical essential characteristics, not identical manufacturing sites, not identical dossiers. The continued transparency and mutual trust is key for successful reliance. Industry should be transparent about their dossier differences. Regulators need to be more transparent about their requirements and review timelines. And in a way, there's a need for an environment of collaboration between the two and not a competition. The last point is that the different levels of dossier details are necessary to ensure continued alignment of the product with the SRA product. Differences need to be cited and justified to the regulators. And after all, we are producing a product, or we want to get a product produced and approved, and also we need to ensure that it is continually available to the patients, to the globe. And with this, I will finish my presentation. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Mike, for very clear and detailed thoughts, sharing the thoughts on sameness of product, particularly linking to the manufacturing site and then supply chain, whether GMP, GDP, or a CMC in terms of the dossier lag. And then, so this is really very insightful. Thank you very much, Mike. So now moving on to the panel session. You have about 30 minutes to go until 3:30, Mike. Please take over to moderate the panel session. And the panelists, please make yourself available for the questions and then discussion, please.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all. I would like to start by acknowledging and thanking the participants, Shaitanya, Hilde, and Mary, for their great presentations. Shaitanya has talked about like supply chain issues, and Hilde talks about reliance in terms of GMP inspections. Marie and myself talk about the sameness. All of these are complementary to each other. What I would like to start with, to state how important is for each of the following conditions to be met when assessing product sameness in order to apply reliance. When we talk about same exact supporting documentation is submitted, a clone dossier, is that important to us? What's the impact? Have we seen it in before? Have we seen an impact? I know reliance is not a new concept. We have been using reliance on CPP for a long time, but now we're taking it to a different level. And when we talk about the same exact documentation, where this could lead us, does anyone have any response to this? Or when we talk about same manufacturing site as the reference market is used, what is the most important thing for the panelists regarding these topics? Same quality standards are met, or documentation highlighting justifying differences between the SRA and NRA dossiers. I'll open the podium for the panelists to start.
I can start if you want, Mike.
Go ahead.
But for the question, yes. And I think thanks a lot, and I think it's very interesting to have this poll actually. So obviously, as we mentioned, for us, we work a lot with all the regulatory authorities in our group within the regulatory system sanctioning, and the aim obviously would have to have harmonized dossier, but we're far from it, and we still have to work with what it is. So definitely for the first one, we know, and it's not possible to have a clone dossier. It might, and we can see some of the pilots that are happening in terms of post-authorization changes, in terms of of trying to reach more convergence. So that would be great, and maybe the future will be more harmonized. But we know that we acknowledge that it cannot be a clone dossier. For the same quality standard, obviously, is the most important. The thing is, it's always a dialogue between the industry and the regulators. So the regulators has to ensure that it's the same quality standard. So that's how they have to ensure that it's the same quality standard. So either they can rely on an assessment that's already been done by regulatory authorities, or they will have to assess it themselves to ensure that the same quality standards are met. And we had a lot of questions in the chat regarding all the activities. And when we say same manufacturing sites, yes, it covers all the activities: drug substance, drug products, batch release, packaging. And obviously the level of assessment is different depending on it's a risk-based approach, depending on the importance of the manufacturing process step. So that would be my but again, the last one, the highlighting the difference. I think trust. I think we are building trust, and it's great to have all this conversation in terms of making sure that we have this clarity between industry and regulators on what are the differences, and to be able to discuss and assess them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Marie. Chaitanya, any comments related to supply chain issues, related to USP standards, etc.?
Yeah, Mike, I just want to jump in and talk about regulatory strengthening, because we talked about differences in dossiers, but also interpretation by different national regulatory authorities. I think I'm hopeful because we made a lot of progress through ICH and PICS in terms of bringing convergence, but most of the differences we see still lies on regulators' capability in adopting those changes, but also bringing in harmony. And I think as more and more countries are involved currently, which we still have only 40% of the countries in that, if you want to truly achieve global sameness and harmony, more and more regulators have to be aligned, and WHO has been doing it consistently. We've been helping in pre-qualification, but also regulatory convergence. I think we are in the right direction, but that really needs to expand so that the interpretation of what information each regulator is receiving is aligned.
We're losing your...
I think he's on mute. Yeah, Chaitanya, you are on mute.
Or
complete? Yeah.
Sorry, there's a connection problem. I made my point, but I think we should focus a little more on the regulatory strengthening.
Okay, thanks a lot. And Hilde, any comments?
So I tend to agree with what has already been said, and I think it is indeed very important that with regard to the quality aspects that this needs to be exactly the same. With regard to the GMP aspects, of course, wherever the manufacturing site is in the world, they need to comply with the GMP regulations. But also here, with regard to the GMP aspects, also there, I think there is still room for improvement. That also with regard to GMP guidelines, that we can come to more convergence between the different regions in the world, so that it would become more easily accepted that we can rely more on the GMP assessments done by other authorities. So there is still work to be done, I think, with regard to this.
Okay, thank you. I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the idea of multiple sites and clarify a point to WHO and to Mary specific. When we start with a reliance program for a certain country, we're always depending on the SRA in terms of like where the material is made and how it's made, etc. So when we file in a dossier in a certain country, we file exactly the same manufacturing site or sites if it's allowed, if the countries allow multiple sites in that specific country. And if multiple sites are not allowed in one dossier, we file what is applicable for us, what is viable for us. Later on, if we want to introduce another site, we introduce it first for the reference market and then go to the NRA. So it's not like we introduce out of a sudden a new site that we say this is for country A without any justification, without any linking to the SRA. So that's and this is the point I want to make. So we're on the same page when we talk about like one manufacturing site for both. Yes, the common manufacturing sites are for both. That's what we talk about. Yeah. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. Dinesh?
Yes, there is one question to Hilda. Hilda likes to, I mean, I see the comment, she likes to, wanted to answer in person. The question is, may I read the question, Hilda, for you? Or
Yes.
The topmost question, it says, RTEMS the mainstay of inspections because we see the success seen during COVID, ? And does the RTEMS MIS takes precedence on on-site inspections?
Okay, yes, so indeed during the COVID period, we have shown that the real-time remote inspections are working, and this was quite successful. However, as I mentioned briefly during my presentation, now in 2022, we have resumed also on-site inspections because we can cover a lot of things with the real-time remote inspections, but still for some aspects, it's sometimes better to be on site. I would say, especially for sites that have never been inspected before by us. The real-time remote inspections will stay as a third pillar of GMP activities at the EDQM, and most probably in the future will be used for re-inspections or to have a look at when there was a critical issue and a CAPA needs to be implemented, to use real-time inspections to check on that. But where possible, we will start to resume on-site inspections.
All right. So Mike, there is one question, particularly for you. I read the question. Yes. The sameness is considered crucial from regulator perspective. And Mike talked about the difference between SRA and NRA dossier, but it is in fact different SRA dossier due to individual SRA regulator requirement. And it continues on to say NRA regulator would therefore pick the prudent approach for adopting a more stringent quality standards. So your thought, Mike?
Yes, I fully understand. And when we talk about sameness here, we're talking, our focus is on the product, sameness of product. What's important is what we deliver to the patients, sameness of the product. Now, one of the things that we still face or challenging to us is that when we have a product that's undergoing reliance, the first thing that we hear from our country offices is, we need to give them the same dossier. And this is where the global team jumps in and say, no, we cannot give the same or the same dossier as the SRA. We give information, as I've mentioned, that are essential, information that are critical to the product, information that fully describe the product, how it's made and how it's put together. But the little pieces of information we take out, this is where it represents a hurdle to us in the future. It's only about like post-approval maintenance that we are concerned about. And we have in the past seen situations where we have reliance, and it's simply reliance on CPP, and yet the we have, like, in some cases filed annual reports or notifications or type 1A for the product in Europe or in the US. Yet those countries would demand that we tell them about this. Yes, we do tell them about this. And sometimes they demand that we file these in their country. And this is where it takes a long time for these minor things to get reviewed and approved. And if we put the same dossier in these countries, it will take forever to get approval of all these changes throughout the life cycle of the product. And then, as I mentioned, then we can't have a product that at the manufacturing side that represents what we have in the dossier for those markets, because they're waiting for a change to take place in those countries where it's already implemented in the SRA. So this is where we have to put aside a certain amount of the product for country A and say, let's make sure that we have this product for country A for the next 2 years until they approve these little changes. And then we get in a problem with supply chain and continuity to the patients. So this is the challenge that we always have. Again, we give the same essential information in line with their requirements. And we show them exactly what we filed in the SRA. And this is probably the next step, is to go side by side and illustrate the differences in the dossier between the SRA and NRA, and justify why we're not given all this information. It's not like we're hiding anything. We're not doing anything in secret or anything that is against our ethics or anything. But we need to be more transparent, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. There is one question again on the product sameness, and probably this may help to, deconstruct some of the misconceptions on the topic. It says some agencies / SRA have tighter specifications, but the proposed specs for low and medium income country market is to be different from SRA. Would this be considered sameness?
With specifications, and when we file a product, I mean, look at assay of a product in the US, for example. Assay is you can pass a product if it's between 90 to 110%. In Europe, it's between 95 to 105. Yet the same product, we produce the same product, but this same product satisfies both assays. If a country is using the US, for example, as a reference market, we give them the same specs as the US market. And we give them the same CPP and the same specifications, the same composition. It doesn't mean that this product going to country A is inferior to the product that's going in Europe. In Europe, it's going with the specs of 95, 105, etc. But yet we make sure that our products are passing the tighter specs in the globe, and we don't have like channels for one country and channels for another country, etc. But we start with the same specifications as the reference market.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Like at least from my point of view, there is. Can I go on, Mike? There is one more question. There's a few more questions. We have 10 more minutes to go.
Oh yeah.
Unless you have your own thoughts to
no.
pick on the brains of the panelists yourself. Can I continue? There is one interesting question. This is to Murray. Implementation of regulatory reliance is not one size fits all. The NRA, depending on the technical resource, have to develop their risk-based when implementing reliance. What advice can you give to NRA with regards to reliance and sameness to adopt for their agency?
Thanks a lot for the question. I think it's a very important point. Definitely. So reliance, I think it's for each NRA to look at their own needs and to define their risk-based approach. So they should look at what type of product they are receiving, what type of resources they have in-house in terms of technical stuff and in terms of capability in assessing some of this dossier. Also looking at the opportunities for reliance. So what reference authorities have they got in the neighboring country or that receive the same type of product? And also looking at the national settings, so the public health needs and the health needs of the country. So really, it's for each of the country to decide what reliance model could work. And for us, as part of the regulatory system strengthening program, when we go and do the benchmarking with the regulatory authorities in the different parts of the world, we always say, I think it's important to look and to ask yourself 3 questions. What can we do together? So where can I collaborate with other authorities, for example, in terms of inspection? What do I need to do alone? So, for example, overseeing local manufacturer or overseeing the safety adverse events of your markets. And where can I rely? Where can I actually use already an assessment that's already done? So it's 3 important questions. What do I need to do alone? What can we do together? And where can I rely on other authorities? And this helps into determining what focus should have, what they should focus their resource on. Because we always say we should avoid duplication where possible. That's the whole aim of Reliance. And we don't have globally, there's limited regulatory resources. So we really have to look at what can we be more efficient and use the resources as best as possible. So to avoid duplication when we can, to have work sharing and collaborative effort when we can, and for those activities where they have to, they are only done by one authority, then they have to lie with that authority. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Marie. There is one question on Mike. You touched upon sameness linking to dossier. Somewhere similar to that, there is one question. It says, would the ECs, they're talking about established conditions, to be included in ICH MQ or M4Q, be the way forward to ensure sameness of products?
That's a very, very good question. I think like with the established conditions and the Q13, is it Q13 or 12? I'm not sure. Yeah, but it has to be first adopted by multiple countries. I don't know if established conditions has been accepted by all countries. Once we have acceptance within the entire region of ICH and implementation of that guidance, I think it's really important to put it as our components of Reliance, I would say, and with established conditions, you clearly identify one condition as being like a major, a critical one.
Critical control points.
Yeah, and it also talks about like the ways we can implement changes, like if there is any change in that condition. In the US and EU, I mean, it's clear and straightforward, whether it's in terms of documentation needed, and in terms of conditions to be satisfied, and in terms of timeline for approval. All these things have to also be clear from the NRAs when we went on to enroll every regulatory agency in this and implement it in Reliance, because at the end we want the product to continue to evolve and be available for all patients in the globe, not just like certain patients. That's our mission.
Okay, there is another question for you, Mike. This is from an anonymous attendee. It says, do MNCs then submit the same dossier to all the SRAs? Do slight difference still exist between EU dossier, US dossier, JP dossier?
We never
WHO dossier.
Good. I see where you go. No, we never say that we submit the same dossier to the SRAs. We submit our dossiers according to the country's requirement. In Europe, for example, microbial testing is needed on most products, and it's in the US. They're trying to go that way, but we're not there yet. There is some differences in requirements, also in the regional requirements. There's some differences. So the dossier we submit to Europe is not the same dossier we submit to US. Yet Europe does not say that give me the same dossier as US, etc. Every country or every region have their own requirements. according to what they consider important for them and for the patient's safety.
Yeah, that's good. Part of the question also says, does Pfizer maintains this list of differences to share with SRAs and NRAs if they request?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay.
We have any? Yeah.
If I may, I think, I'm an optimistic. So I think when we see some pilot like, with the ICMA PQS,
Yes.
and that's exactly and I think the future will be different. And I really think, I don't know how long it will take, but in terms of trying to harmonize, because as we said, I think the fact that the same quality variation is reviewed and assessed by 6-7 more stringent regulatory authorities is not and duplication of assessment is not the best use of resources. So let's hope that, I think, there will be a different future in terms of more convergence and harmonization, and in terms of submitting similar dossier to different authorities.
Sure. And there is one interesting thought here. It says the survey results would be different between the industry and the regulators. ... Would that be different? I think that maybe talking about the Mentimeter, I think.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's one thing that it's always it's always an application and an assessment and an authorization from the regulators. So obviously, as a regulator, they have the responsibility of verification and ensuring that the quality standards are the same. So yes, I think that the response to the survey will be slightly different, but we all have the same goal. But in terms of verifying, it's always a position from the applicant and an assessment and evaluation for the authorities with an outcome and a discussion, obviously, and chance to explain things within the assessments.
Yeah. Okay, I think pretty much we covered most of the questions here, and then
Dinesh,
yes.
I have a question for Chaitanya.
Okay, sure.
And he mentioned the quality issues remain the main reason for supply chain problems. Can you elaborate on this aspect with like examples of quality issues that affect supply chain?
Thank you, Mike, for reinforcing that question. I think first thing I want to point out is, while I showed the data of the US, but quality issues remain the problem pretty much across the globe. In each country, if you look at what are the various problems in ensuring the supply chain, drug shortages always come back to majority quality issues. And within the quality issues, in the topic of sameness, if you divide those again, quality issues arise from different places. Upstream, they arise from the suppliers and raw materials, whether it's API, key starting materials like excipients. Therefore, supplier evaluation and ensuring raw material testing is quite important today. It also arises because of GMPs and manufacturing themselves. But again, laboratory controls and packaging, the downstream of it. So it's important to tackle, and that's exactly why the definition of sameness covers all that. Same supplier, same manufacturing. So it's a responsibility of both manufacturer and regulator to tackle that. We talked a bit about how manufacturers are doing it, their part, but I think we continue to see the differences of how that's being handled by different regulators. And that diversity of regulatory capability across countries in handling that, in understanding that is different. And most of the efforts we see, as Mike pointed out, is NRAs take these decisions based on their own public health requirements and the product requirements, and that continues to evolve. What I also want to point out is we're not just looking at the current system, but what's coming up, like, whether it's COVID or nitrosamines issue, we have several new challenges again, where there's difference in regulatory approach, not just between NRAs and SRAs, but even within the stringent regulatory authorities, there's huge difference in how that's being approached. So again, like Murray, I'm optimistic that we have convergence mechanisms where we are able to discuss transparently, and that continues. But even for us as Pharmacopoeia, focusing on science, there's a need to evolve more and more tools. Whether it's new challenges like impurities or new technologies like continuous manufacturing has to come up with new standards. There's a lot of work that's being done. But again, we have to look at the source of quality issues in each component.
Yeah.
And the good thing is you see the same trends, whichever the country is, and it's the same issues. By addressing these again, these issues can be addressed globally together and find common solutions. But it requires that collaboration among different stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you for a great explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, the time is up.
Yeah, okay.
And thank you very much, panelists, Marie, Chaitanya, Hilda, Mike, yourself, and for efficient moderation of this session. And for the participant, the outcome, the take-home points from this session will be given at the end of the session, whole day. And then now we have a break for 15 minutes. Let's come back at 3:45. Please do come back. We have part 2, another interesting session to complete. Yeah, thank you very much. See you later at 3:45.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marie.
ايه سيد مهدي كيفك منيح؟ ايه ماشي الحال، هيك هيدي المسج بعثت لك اياها قبل ما احكي معك على الميوت كونكت. بلا يهمك، يلا كل شيء تمام ومنشان عملتهم كمان يمكن احسن. متاكد انتم مهندسين بكره مضبوط منيح معه. اوكي معه. هي مشكور كثير يا مهدي. والله باي. جان كيفك؟ ماشي الحال؟ والله ماشي الحال، أنا بكونفرنس and yeah كنت virtual conference كنت أنا عم بحكي هلا عنا بريك 10 minutes break يا كيف؟ لا بألمانيا صرت يا وصرت لي 10 أيام يا اوكي والله كله تمام ماشي الحال بس مرشح شوي هي سقعت وصلوا هني مرشحين كلهم مرشحين عدوني دول يا ايه ايه بعرف.
بحكي معهم، يعني حكيت مع الفرق اللي نحن كنا بدنا نعمل شيء، بدي بحكي مع الكول سنتر خلت امبارح تلفنهم ما حدا بيقول لي رح نسجل هيدا الكول وبيغيبوا ما حدا برد علي.
يا
بالك انتو كمان فينا نحكي او
هي فيك تحكي بس لك كمان ما بعرف اذا في يفيدك بهالشغله هي، لان انا عندي نفس القصه. انا مثلا اعطيني مثلا انا 8000 ليميت اسحب على الكارت بعدين بوقف الكارت، بتفوت لجوا بدهم يشارجوك 8 بالألف على السحب. يا جربت ارفعها، يعني هيدا المعاش تبعي مثلا بيجيني انا 15 16000 بالشهر، بدي اسحب. ايه بدي اسحب. يا ما قدر يساعدني. هيدي صار من شي سنه ونص. على كل حال فيك تقول له، لان هلا صارت وقت اللي حكيته انا ما كان في بروبلم ممكن تتحل. عرفت شو؟ جرب ابعث له مسج شوف اذا في سيارة، لان اتس اوت اوف يور كنترول. انت بس عم تاخذ مصاري عم تعطيهم الموظفين او شيء يمكن او شيء ما بعرف. بس اوكي 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 لا بس كمان هذا السالري. ايه بعت له مسج شوف اذا في سعر. لازم يقدر يساعدك. اقول لك يمكن مشكله بدها تنحل مع اليومين ثلاثه او شيء. ما بعرف شو قصته. يا اوه ماي جاد. سبعة بالمية عمل قلبهم 7%. ايه نصابين والله. ايه عرفت نصابين والله. يا ما انا ما اخذت ليك كل المصاري كل قرش عم يجيني بدي عم بصرف عم بعمر مش ما اخذ شيء بالبنك من شهر لشهر. ايه مظبوط. ايه يا ما فيك تعمل له. ما فيك تأمن لبنوك اثنين ابدا. هو يمشي ما في شيء ماشي والله ما في شيء ماشي. ما بعرف. طيب yes I will.
Okay, welcome everybody for part 2 of today's session, that is a quality track. Part 2 is on national quality control strategies. Welcome again, all participants, the 3 distinguished speakers, and the moderator. So let's first get started with the first speaker. She's Lisa Kerr. She's going to talk about Australia's pharmaceutical quality control, quality assurance testing program. And Lisa is the head of Australia TGA Laboratories, doing a great work in this part of the world. Welcome, Lisa. All is yours. Lisa, you are on mute. Okay.
Thanks, Dinesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for inviting me to speak today. As Dinesh mentioned, I am the head of the TGA's laboratories. I've worked at the TGA for 23 years. So I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about the TGA's laboratories. So we are Australia's national regulatory laboratory for therapeutic goods. And so we test medicines and medical devices. We had our origins in the Australian Dental Standards Laboratory, which we think started in the 1930s. And another part of our branch started with the National Biological Standards Laboratory, commencing operations in 1959. We're also designated as not one but 2 WHO collaborating centres, one for the quality assurance of vaccines and other biologicals, and the other one is for drug quality assurance. That first one was designated in 1983 and the one for drugs in 1987. In addition to that, we're also a WHO Influenza Essential Regulatory Laboratory, one of 4 in the world. And of course, we have ASIC 17025 accreditation, which means that we are externally accredited. So we have auditors come in and make sure that we're doing the right thing. We are now located in Fairburn in Canberra. We have just commenced a major facilities move. It was only 10 kilometres, but it was a really large operation. And now we are in state-of-the-art facilities, which have been designed for our current and future state capabilities. We've been there. This is our 3rd month that we've been in our new building. The investment in this new building is a strong indicator of the importance that the Australian government places on independent authoritative testing of therapeutic goods. It has become apparent during the pandemic that not only the Australian government expects the TGA to have its own independent laboratories, but the Australian people also expect this as well. So our functions are testing of medicines and medical devices. In reality, we may be asked in some capacity to be involved in a variety of problems that occur in the market. We also provide advice, so we have direct experience in the application of standards, testing methods, and the products themselves. We do pre-market assessment, so we get involved in the evaluation, particularly the quality evaluation of vaccines, but we also do container safety and sterility evaluations. And of course, we are involved in standards development, whether it's developing methods, providing input into ISO standards or pharmacopeal standards. We're involved in all of those things. So in particular, we're very heavily involved in standards for PPE and breast implants at the moment. Next slide, please. So within the laboratories, we have the following expertise. Of course, we have pharmaceutical chemistry, material science, biochemistry, molecular biology, protein chemistry, immunology. We do vaccine science. We have microbiologists who look at the sterility, and we have mechanical, biomedical, and electrical engineers in our branch as well. So with the increasing complexity of products comes the increasing complexity of product problems. And so we form multidisciplinary teams depending on the task that's assigned to us. This is within the labs and also within the Department of Health and other government departments. And we also partner with other governments as well if required. So for example, when we have to stand up urgent testing capability, such as with the nitrosamines issue that plagued all of us a while ago. Next slide, please. So I've been asked to describe to you our QA approach to testing. So basically, we don't test products when they enter the country. Australia is a fairly large country, comparatively, in my mind at least. We don't have the time to test everything that comes across our border. So we don't also test products for registration purposes either. We did do that a while ago, about 15 years ago, but we've ceased doing that. So just to reiterate, we don't test every product and we don't test products for registration purposes either. Although if an evaluator wanted us to test something because they were concerned about something, we would do that. So our focus is very much on post-market surveillance for pretty much all products. So prescription medicines, over-the-counter, complementary medicines, and medical devices. The only type of product we perform batch release on nowadays are vaccines. Our batch release approach is to review documentation for all vaccines on the batch release program and to verify the documentation with our own testing for some batches. But I will have to say, for COVID vaccines, we are currently testing every batch. In terms of convergence, about a decade ago, we relaxed the requirements to comply with a single pharmacopoeia for medicines, and we now accept 3, depending on what the circumstances are. And for medical devices, the manufacturer specifies the standard that they claim compliance to. We have a number of programs in play that determine our approach to testing, which I'll explain on the next slide. To be able to form the multidisciplinary teams and to be across a large number of products available in Australia, we are constantly reviewing our capabilities. So, for example, over the last little while, we've been focusing on our mRNA testing abilities for at least a couple of years. Next slide, please. So in essence, at a broader level, we have 4 components to our testing program. The first one is responsive. So this is where problem and complaint investigation comes in. So for adverse reactions, consumer complaints, breaches of the Therapeutic Goods, the Australian Therapeutic Goods Act. Responsive testing is not generally risk assessed as it comes to us after an event in the marketplace. The TGA officers may need information or evidence to make further determinations about the regulatory pathway or for regulatory action, and so we just get on with it and start our testing. This usually forms the minority of the testing that we do. The next type of testing that we do is programmed testing. It's proactive testing based on information and risk assessment. This is where we're monitoring products for compliance. This testing is done because we're concerned about the quality of a product or a product range or the products from a particular manufacturer, depending on what information we have from our GMP inspectors, for example. Our testing in this part of the testing program is conducted in projects, and we use information and advice to formulate the list of proposals, which are projects for forming our annual testing plan. We use an ISO 31000 based risk assessment process, which incorporates 17 risk factors to score the proposals. The risk factors are in 3 categories, starting with safety implications of a quality fail. For example, if the harm is major or minor and whether the potential issues are long-standing or not. We have risk factors, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is the testing program that includes our standing projects. So our standing projects include providing batch certificates of pharmaceutical products. So these are biological products that are manufactured in Australia. We have standing projects for vaccines, nicotine vaping products, medicinal cannabis, and sports supplements. Recently, we've done a lot of work on sunscreens, which are of seasonal interest to Australians. The other type of testing that we do is maintenance testing, which is method development, and it includes calibration of international standards. This is testing for routine reasons, such as developing a method for a pharmacopoeia or a standard. As an influenza essential reference laboratory, one of our duties is to calibrate the reference reagents for influenza vaccines, and this testing belongs in the maintenance category also. We also have an external testing program where we offer our testing services to other countries. not to pharmaceutical manufacturers, because we're an independent government agency. We aren't able to perform contract testing services, but we do testing for overseas governments, for the World Health Organization. It's part of our duties as a WHO collaborating centre. We have tested for UNICEF, we have tested for the Red Cross, and we also test for Pacific Islands, which I'll talk about in my next slide. So next slide, please. So in addition to testing for Australia, we also test for Pacific Island countries through the Pacific Medicines Testing Program. This is a program that is that we're partnering with the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We have 13 participating countries. These are countries that do not have their own testing laboratory. Our first phase in this program was between 2017 and 2021, and it was so successful that we have launched a second phase, which is from 2021 to 2025. This is based on Australia's testing program, so we do complaint and investigation. So if a country that is participating in the program notices something strange with one of their products, or there are complaints or adverse reactions occurring in their country, they can send us an email and we'll get onto them to ask some questions about what has happened, and some questions specifically around the event, so that we can tailor the testing. And then the product will be sent to Australia for a laboratory investigation. So basically, we will do any product depending on our capabilities, anytime, and we give priority advice to the countries if they have such a circumstance. We also do quality assurance testing for the countries. We do these in campaigns. The medicines come from the central medical store in the countries. We tend to target medicines of concern in the Pacific, which are medicines for non-communicable diseases, which include medicines for diabetes, cardiovascular medicines, but we also test antibiotics. And in our second phase, we have also introduced the ability to test products that are used in the pandemic. So we have tested face masks, hand sanitizers, and any other things that they would like us to test. And this year in our campaign, we are also including products used for maternal health at the request of the participating countries. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how we do risk assessment, because as I mentioned, we don't have the time to get across all of the products that come across Australia's borders. We need to make sure that we're deploying our resources where they're needed most. And so we've had this risk-based assessment of our testing program in place for about 10 years now. So the first element of the risk assessment process is looking at safety. So this is basically the degree and timeframes of harm caused by a deficiency in the quality we're testing for. So the context of risk is a quality deficiency in a product. The likelihood factors that we look at are whether or not there are alternatives available. Is there a shortage of the product? We look at GMP or conformity assessment issues. We look at the adverse events that we hold. We may consult other countries about that. We look at our own testing and other people's testing if it's available. If it's a product that is subjected to being counterfeit, we look at that. If it's a new product, we look at the experience of the manufacturer. We look at our recalls information, and we look at pre-market issues that are identified by our own evaluators or our overseas counterparts. With the consequence factors, we include a consideration of things such as the indication of the medicine, or in the case of medical device, the intended purpose. We look at the demographics, if there's a specific demographic that is intended for the medicine or the medical device. We look at the route of administration, or whether or not the device is implantable. We look at the size of the population that is intended to be using the product, and the length of exposure to the product. So is it used once, or is it used for a chronic disease, for example? Next slide, please. So in terms of convergence, we publish our test results, and that's a snapshot of the TGA website. You can Google that if you want to go and have a look at it. We publish our test results in a variety of places on the TGA website, starting with simple results such as shown on the slide. We also publish the project test reports as well. Some of the products of current interest have their own page on the TGA website, such as nicotine vapes, the face masks, and the COVID-19 vaccines. We don't publish the test results where we're performing the testing on behalf of another government though, but we do make the statistics available. So for example, how many have we done and what are the failure rates? We tend to find that a notification that a failed test result will be published on the website focuses the attention of the manufacturer on their compliance responsibilities. So that's one benefit of publishing test results. But the other benefit of publishing our test results is that we include information such as batch numbers, etc. And this is free to be accessed. So anybody anywhere in the world can go and have a look at what our test results actually were and read our project reports. Next slide, please. And that is just a snapshot of our COVID-19 test results. You can see that we actually test by the registration number and by the batch number as well. So we have a lot of products, COVID-19 vaccines that are coming into Australia and then are donated. So other countries are very interested in whether or not the TGA has been involved in the batch release process. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for a very informative presentation on your laboratory's activities, the quality assurance program, and then particularly risk factors are very interesting to us. Thank you very much. And we'll save some questions for you during the panel, yeah? And now we'll move on. The next presentation is also by a national regulatory authority. Before that, I would like to remind the participants to send in your questions in the Q&A option of the Zoom. So our next presenter is from National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agencies, Wan Nurul Aina. And welcome, Wan. Welcome, Aina. I think call you Aina. That's good.
Yeah,
that's you're okay with that, right?
yeah. You can call me Aina.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aina. Please carry on, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dinesh. Okay, hello everyone, and good day to everyone. Okay, so basically my presentation today is more like a sharing an overview about my agency, National Pharmaceutical Control Regulatory Agency. So next slide. Okay, so this is basically my presentation outline. So I'll give a bit introduction about about my agency and also our functions and activities during pre-registration phase and also post-registration phase. Okay, next slide. So I will start off a little bit of introduction about my agency, National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, which is a regulatory agency under Pharmaceutical Services Program, Ministry of Health Malaysia. So MPRA is actually a government agency that is responsible in ensuring quality, safety, and efficacy of pharmaceutical products, as well as quality and safety of natural and cosmetic products marketed in Malaysia. So MPRA is formerly known as the National Pharmaceutical Control Laboratory that was set up in October 1978. So the slide here is our current organizational structure, which consists of 4 centers. So basically I was in Center of Compliance and Quality Control. So I was located at Traditional and Cosmetic Analysis Unit. So basically the laboratory in MPRA was under Product and Cosmetic Testing Section, which is in the Center of Compliance and Quality Control. Next slide, please. So this slide is our mission, vision, and objectives. So our mission is to safeguard the nation's health through scientific excellence in the regulatory control of medicinal products and cosmetic. Our vision is to be an internationally renowned regulatory authority for medicinal products and cosmetics. And our objective is to ensure therapeutic substance approved for local market are safe, effective, and of quality, and also to ensure that cosmetic products approved are safe and of quality. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically MPRA histories and milestone. Like I said earlier, MPRA was set up in October 1978. So starting from 1985, MPRA was given the task of ensuring the quality, efficacy, safety of pharmaceutical through evaluation of scientific data and laboratory tests. So over the years, MPRA has extended the control of the quality and safety of other products like generics, natural product, cosmetic, API, and all, including lot release activities. So we are renamed 2 times throughout these years. One during 1992, where we renamed from National Pharmaceutical Control Laboratory, we renamed to National Pharmaceutical Control Bureau. And in 2016, we renamed again to National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency. Next slide. Okay, so this one is basically our function, our activities, where we involve activities covering from preclinical, clinical trial, regulatory review, and finally post-registration, which is post-marketing surveillance. Next slide. So the legislation involved in pharmaceutical product registration. So in Malaysia, the Control of Drugs and Cosmetic Regulation 1984 were promulgated under the Sales of Drug Act 1952, where the authority known as Drug Control Authority, DCA, established under this regulation. Where it was tasked to ensuring the quality, safety, and efficacy of medicinal product through the registration, including quality control, inspection, and licensing, and post-registration activities. So NPRA act as the secretariat to this authority, DCA, Drug Control Authority. Next slide. Okay, so under the CDCR 1984 Regulation 7.1 stated that no person shall manufacture, sell, supply, import, possess, or administer any product unless the product is a registered product and the person holds the appropriate license required and issued under this regulation. Next. So this is basically like a definition of quality control, where quality control concerned with sampling, specification, and testing, as well as the organization, documentation, and release procedure, which ensure that necessary and relevant tests are carried out and that materials are not released for use, no product released for sale or supply until their quality has been judged satisfactory. Next. So this is a basic requirement of quality control. Definitely, we for quality control, we require adequate facilities, trained personnel, approved procedures, the test method used has been validated, and also records are made readily available. And of course, any deviation or are fully recorded and required to be investigated. Next slide. So in order to ensure high quality and efficient service, MPRA has obtained MS ISO 9001 certification, as well as the laboratory. Our laboratory are also accredited by the Department of Standard Malaysia with MS ISO 17025. Sample testing here is conducted on pharmaceutical product, natural product, and cosmetic in accordance with the regulatory standards. So this product testing is conducted for the purpose of surveillance of registered product and notified cosmetic. So the testing in MPRA is performed on sample of product with reported adverse drug reaction, as well as sample from product complaint, and also enforcement programs activities. Next slide. So we go on with MPRA quality control practice. So basically, it is a prime responsibility of the product registration holder to ensure that products marketed are in accordance with the standard and requirement of the authority. So here, registered product may be sampled and tested for compliance. We also check for labels and package insert of the sample to ensure compliance with the requirements. Besides that, during the pre-registration here in Malaysia, we also MPRA is no longer conduct any sample testing at this phase since 2008. So I think it's quite the same with TGA Australia, because now we are more focusing on the data evaluation for pre-registration phase, where we evaluate for the protocol of analysis and analytical method validation protocol on and report during this pre-registration phase. For post-registration phase, we do conduct quality control testing during this phase. Okay, next slide. Okay, I will go for the pre-registration phase. Next slide. So this is basically a flow chart to show the product registration process in our agency. So at stage data evaluation, where for the QC aspect, where we do the evaluation of the AMV and protocol of analysis. And next slide. So data evaluation is, like I said, is one of the registration process. So for the quality control part, the applicant are required to submit analytical method validation protocol and report together with protocol of analysis for evaluation. So this is one of the regulatory review requirement. After the approval by the by DCA, then QC quality control testing comes in during post-marketing surveillance. Next slide. So evaluation of this data is required as documented evidence to ensure that the test method used are suitable. So this is also inclusive preservative and diluent, if any, and also active pharmaceutical ingredients. Next slide. So this is just to show the type of analytical method required to be validated. It involves several tests in chemical testing and also microbiological testing. Next slide. So this is the validation parameters requirement. So it's basically based on type of analytical procedures. Next. And this one is parameters required for partial validation. Next one. And this one is the validation characteristic for microbiological tests that are required for submission. So we go for post-registration phase. Next slide, please. Next. So for quality control testing pharmaceutical product during post-marketing surveillance, the product registration holder is required to submit certificate of analysis together with protocol of analysis for the laboratory reference when conducting the testing. So the certificate must be the latest one for the intended product to be tested. So, and officials, okay, sorry, the next slide. Along that, the sample also must be submitted for testing, where the sample must be in their original packaging and labeling. And the sample submitted must be from the same manufacturing premise as stated in the application of registration. Next. So this is just a numbers of sample that tested in our agency from 2018 until August 2022. Next. So our way forward, our agency way forward, currently for quality control aspect, we want to enhance our facility and lab expertise in terms of testing on COVID-19 vaccine. And the second one is we are currently in preparation to become a WHO listed authority, which we expected to take place in 2023. So hopefully we can achieve maturity level 4, hopefully. So that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aina, for such a detailed presentation, and best wishes to NPRA for WHO listed agency and the WL4 assessment.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. Yeah, thank you,
Pray
Aina.
for
We'll
us.
save some questions.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. We'll save some questions at the panel at the end. Thank you again. After the two NRA presentations, we will move on to industry presentation, that is industry perspective on in-country testing by Jörg Gaab from Roche. Jörg, all yours.
Thank you, Nesh, and also welcome from my end to this presentation on the industry perspective on in-country testing, which I present on behalf of IFPMA. My name is Jörg Gaab, and I'm based in Switzerland. So on the first slide, I would like to start off with some terminology in order to make sure that we have all a common understanding of the scope. So the scope for the next slides would be the registration testing and import testing. So registration testing is performed in conjunction with a product registration, and this can be at various stages of the life cycle. And it is performed in governmental labs. Import testing, however, is a routine QC testing of medicines as part of the importation process, and it can be performed in governmental laboratories or under responsibility of the manufacturer or importer. On the next slide, I would like to summarize the challenges and implications that we see in connection with in-country testing. So first of all, the delay of the patient access to the medicines. One reason is that the testing and the implementation of increasingly complex testing methods takes pretty long, or can take pretty long. The supply of product samples and materials is very complex, requires specific storage and distribution conditions, and also need to be dealt with import formalities. There is also a risk of supply interruption, which is significant. Not only the delayed product release to the market caused by the testing increases the risk of supply interruption. Other factors are the reduced number of product units which are used for the testing, and the reduced remaining shelf life time, especially for products with short shelf life, for example, biologics. And we see a misuse of resources as there are capacity challenges to national regulatory authorities and their control laboratories and the industry. We have found a neglectable effectiveness in an industry survey in 2014, where it has been found a batch rejection rate for import testing of 0.05%. And we can also explain these figures. We see a high degree of redundancy. Also a part of, as a result of this survey, we found that certain product categories can be analyzed up to 32 times in a global supply. On the next slide, you can see the industry perspective that we have worked out in IFPMA because of these challenges and implications that we are seeing. IFPMA thinks that in-country testing should not be routinely required for the following reasons. The manufacturers have appropriate control over their production through in-process controls, validation of the processes, and release testing of the finished product. And everything is performed according to internationally recognized GMP standards. There is a robust quality management system in place which rules everything that has been done, that is done in the facilities, and including validation, control, and risk management strategies. Also, the handling, storage, and transportation is performed according to internationally recognized GDP standards. And the manufacturers are under oversight. They have reporting requirements and regular internal audits and inspections by competent NRAs. In the next slide, we see the conclusions, the key recommendations from this perspective. First of all, IFPMA recommends more collaboration between regulators, and we already saw some examples, and use reliance where possible, for example, relying on certificates of analysis that are issued by other national regulatory agencies. And this can be, for example, stringent regulatory agencies, authorities, or by manufacturers of products that are inspected and approved by these agencies. Procedures for granting waivers should be defined, and risk-based conditions and international standards should be applied. The number of product samples that are used for physical testing should be reduced and minimized, especially for registration testing where a visual inspection takes place. So here, alternatives such as mock-ups or pictures are proposed. And very important, to refocus the testing resources on risk-based marketing surveillance. Here, it is a clear advantage that also the identification of substandard and falsified products can be detected within the national supply chain. And before switching to the next slide, I'd like to spend some moments to summarize further main advantages of this post-marketing surveillance testing. It is a prudent use of capacity, as this is a risk-based procedure, so not a routine procedure. The control of the national supply chain is possible if the sampling occurs very close to the patient. So this means not in the warehouses of the importers, but from the market, from pharmacies, from warehouses of distributors and so on. And with this, also the detection of counterfeits or unauthorized products is possible. And accordingly, the effectiveness and the rejection rate is much higher compared to testing upon imports. And last not least, this testing caused no delay for the patient access. So on the next slides, I would like to focus on today's trends, as the industry perspective is heard by several agencies that have acknowledged the limited value of routine import in-country testing compared to the benefit of the full or partial exemptions. And these cases include refocus on post-marketing surveillance testing and the implementation of reliance-based waiver schemes or other risk-based approaches. And in the next slide, we can see that agencies implemented or refocused on post-marketing surveillance testing and discontinued with other testing categories. We have an example from Australia. This has already been mentioned by Lisa. The discontinuation of the registration testing of biologics, and this change was implemented as the post-marketing surveillance program was considered appropriate to ensure the quality of the medicines. Also, China and Russia discontinued testing activities and replaced this by post-marketing surveillance testing. In China, the routine import testing of chemical products has been stopped, and in Russia, overall, all routine import testing has been stopped and replaced by the so-called selective control. And as we have learned before from AINA, also Malaysia went in this direction in 2008 already. On the next slide, we can see examples where authorities implemented a reliance-based waiver schemes or risk-based approaches. And these are countries from all the continents nearly, and most of them rely on the approval or the release in an SRA country or WHO listed authority maturity level 4 countries. I won't go into more details, but we see that this is the current trend, that more and more countries go in this direction. And the next slide is basically my last slide. I would like to close with this quote from WHO, which nicely takes up the presented topics. The risk of poor quality should be assessed before deciding to request analysis of a product. For example, if the manufacturing site has been found to comply with GMP principles, the manufacturer is under regular supervision of an NRA applying international standards, and there is no specific reason for additional testing of the product. The manufacturer's certificate may be relied upon to indicate the quality of the product. This was my last slide. I still summarized for your reference some literature with respect to the different IFPMA positions on in-country testing, and in the next slide some literature that has been published for this on this topic in scientific journals. And with this, I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jörg. Very, very useful insightful presentation, particularly the key recommendations, today's trends, refocusing on post-marketing surveillance. It's a quite interesting topic to to consider. And with this, I think we end part 2. But what is left is panel discussion now. And then thanks to Nurul, Aina, Lisa, and then yourself, and then I pass the floor to Yog to carry on with the panel discussion. We have about 20 minutes to go before we end at like 4:50, and allowing some 10 minutes for closing remarks. All yours, Yog.
Thank you, Nesh. And I'd like to invite the speakers, Lisa and Aina, to the panel. We are excited to receive questions from the audience. You can use this Q&A function.
Yes, we have a couple of questions, yeah?
Yeah, maybe I can start with a question to the speakers. Aina, for example, you had a very interesting presentation on post-marketing surveillance program, also in your country. And as we have learned, you focus on the sampling from facilities from the product registration holder, right? And this controls the quality of the medicine entering the countries, but does not control the local supply chain or can identify counterfeits, to my understanding. Is there any discussion to extend the program to the whole national supply chain, so also to take samples from wholesalers, pharmacies?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Josh. So for this question, actually, yes, currently in Malaysia, for routine PMS program, for the sample, we get it from the product registration holder. But apart from routine PMS program, we do have a special surveillance program that cater like special cases, like let's say like from alert or complaint that we receive, where this special program we apply risk-based approach. And the sampling, we do sampling like from the hospital and pharmacies, but not like I said, it's not on our routine program. So it's like case to case basis.
Okay, thank you, Aina. And I have one question to Lisa. As we have learned, TGA removed the testing for the biologics during pre-registration. And can you provide some more detail on the decision to discontinue this kind of testing?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Just making sure you can hear me.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we did a bit of a review of the TGA's laboratories testing program. And when it comes to the biologicals, we looked at how many products we had tested and the percentage fail rate, and it was very low. We originally had the batch release testing program in place for biologicals because they're complex molecules and the manufacturing is complex, but it is very resource intensive, as you have mentioned, to set up product specific test methods. They'll have to be validated, and you need specialist analysts in the laboratories to be able to do that. So on balance, looking at our history, which goes to the risk assessment, the history of the compliance of the products that we were testing, we felt it was no longer worthwhile to continue the batch to batch testing. Just for those of you who are not aware, we had a condition of registration in Australia that biological medicine manufacturers had to provide us with the first 5 batches after release, including all of the testing materials and samples themselves. We have found that it's a better use of staff time to be deploying them into areas where there's greater risk in terms of public confidence, that sort of thing. So those analysts are now focusing their attention on getting through the COVID-19 batch release process.
Okay.
We do still test, we do still test the products occasionally as part of post-market surveillance though, so that we're not completely ignoring them, but they're being treated just like small molecule pharmaceuticals.
Georg, just sorry to interrupt, and there is a Mentimeter question for audience. Should we put it up?
Yes, please pull it up. Please.
Okay, sure. We'll put it up. Meantime, you can carry on. Yeah.
It's very interactive. So to include the audience. Lisa, it basically turned out that the assessment of the dossier and the information that is provided is sufficient to judge on the quality of the product, and this can then be later on confirmed in the post-marketing surveillance. This is
yes, that's correct. So we've been evaluating, and it's essentially the same people evaluating and testing these products for many decades, and so we have a lot of knowledge about them, and so we use that knowledge to determine that we don't need to continue the testing of these products. So we relinquished that in, I think it was 2020, 2021.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. So maybe Nesh, can you bring in some questions from the audience?
Yes.
This is done here.
Okay, sure. There is all right. So if countries rely on others for product quality testing, why does it seem more difficult for countries to rely on others for dossier assessments and acceptability is a question. Is it mostly related to differences in the legal framework? Hope it falls into the purview of this panel discussion. Yeah.
I think one of the factors is that it is really expensive to set up a national control laboratory, and for some countries it's just easier to rely on another country's test results. I guess it's also in some respects a little bit easier to manage if you're doing the certificates of analysis versus a full dossier assessment. There's a lot more information to assess. I guess it also comes down to sovereignty as well. I do think that it is a really good idea to be putting reliance mechanisms in place if that is something that is possible. And of course, it comes down to each country's legislation around what is required. So I'm aware that there are some countries that have in their legislation that they must do this testing. Fortunately, in Australia, we don't have that.
Okay, Georg, there is one high-yield question. Maybe can I start asking this?
Sure.
Yeah, this question is to Aina on NPREA. I'll read the question. NPREA has more extensive data requirement for DS and DP testing for pre-registration as compared to other NREA in the region. For instance, NPREA would require internal protocol for test method and validation of test method even for pharmacopoeia methods. In addition, raw data such as chromatogram and calculations are required to be provided as well. Is there a plan for NPREA to remove such extensive requirements for alignment with other NREAs, example TGA and HSA? Because it has a very high vote, I had to put this up. Yeah, Aina, for your thought, please.
Okay, for this question, from what I understand, our pre-registration requirement for data requirement, actually, we already reduced the data requirement, especially on the chromatograms. Like, let's say, like for the calculation, because I think maybe this some maybe case to case basis, because it's very hard for me to answer this question, because from what I understanding, we already reduced the amount of data requirement for during pre-registration. So for example, at the moment, we required like a summary report for the analytical method validation. And some of the parameters we required like the chromatogram, but not all parameters we required the chromatogram currently, from what I know. So at the moment, for this requirement, whether is there any plan for us to remove this requirement? At the moment, our requirement is remain the same, but who knows, maybe in the future, because we maybe do some revise, maybe we can consider this plan.
Okay, thank you, Aina. Should I ask, there is a question, or you want to talk about the Mentimeter results, Joe? You are on mute, Jörg.
Sorry, I can talk about, or we can have a look to the Mentimeter later on.
Okay, sure.
I just see a question in the Q&A. How regulatory reliance be used more for addressing the in-country testing? What type of document or data can be used to support regulatory reliance for such testing?
Yeah.
So what IFPMA is proposing in case of registration to rely on the approval in an SRA country. So with this, it is made sure that the manufacturer work according to GMP and ship according to GDP, that they have implemented a proper quality management system and are under regular oversight of inspectorates that inspect according to internationally harmonized procedures. So the reliance on this SRA approval, or it can be a CPP that can be provided, should be sufficient to make this sure. With respect to relying or to grant waivers in the scope of import testing, here it can be, for example, be relied upon the certificate of analysis from a manufacturer that has been approved and inspected by an SRA country. Maybe there are further ideas from the panel. If not, we can have a look to the Mentimeter.
Certainly, please.
What are the key advantages of reliance-based waivers from in-country testing? This is close to the topic or to the question that we had just now. Creating synergies, reduced redundancies, or prudent use of capacity, refocus on domestic supply chain control, for example, post-marketing surveillance, no delayed patient access, no risk of supply interruptions, and prudent use of product samples, product units can be provided to the patient. So the outcome is pretty even distributed. So the most attractive argument is no delayed patient access, but also to reduce redundancies and make best use of capacity is very highly voted. And also both other alternative questions are nicely distributed. Thank you for this. Any further comments to these results? If not, Nesh, do you have further questions? I can also have a look.
I guess.
Yes, please.
I was just going to say, I guess it really does depend on the types of products that you're talking about when answering these questions. So it also depends on some of the things that I was talking about in the risk assessment around, are there other products on the market that can fill the gap, so that might not be such a problem when it comes to delayed patient access. In reading some of the IFPMA position documents, some of the reasons for not doing in-country testing, which we don't do it, but I think not having equipment such as -70 freezers, for example, was put up as one of the reasons. It kind of depends on the national control laboratory and how well equipped it is as to whether or not it's got the resources to do the testing. I know when we place a high degree of importance on a particular product and getting the test results through, we can do it very quickly so that there isn't any delayed patient access. I do agree about prudent use of the product samples, especially when it comes to the more complicated products that are patient-centric, for example, patient-specific, and we don't test those products in Australia for exactly that reason. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and I think the answers really do depend on which type of product you're testing about. You're talking about.
Okay. Yog, there are two questions for you. Can I go ahead?
Sure.
Yeah, the first one is the results you have presented. Is it the same for generic drugs industry experience?
Yes, sure. I mean, also if these products are manufactured in a country with high regulatory oversight, we can apply reliance. If this product has been assessed in one stringent regulatory agency, for example.
Okay. So the next question is, what are considered as mock-ups according to the IFPMA best practice paper?
Mock-ups, to my understanding, refer to packaging material that can be filed, or also the artworks. So this would be PDF files that show how the makeup will look like.
Okay, one more for you, Jog, and sorry, keeping you busy. It says, what would be the recommendation interval in terms of years for post-marketing surveillance testing? That is, for the same marketed product, would it be recommended to be tested every 4 years by the same NRA? Like, just what's your thought on
that? I would also ask the ladies to respond on this. To my understanding, yes, this should be a risk-based approach, and accordingly, the frequency must be defined in this approach, depending on several factors which are applied in order to identify products that should be tested.
I can add a little bit about the Australian approach to that. We don't have a frequency of retesting, so we don't tie it to the GMP cycle or anything like that. As I put in my presentation, it really does depend on whether or not we have a concern about a particular product. We'll call that in for testing. If we have any concerns after we've done our testing project, we might come back and test that product again. We'll do a follow-up survey of that product to make sure that all of the products in that product range have come back into compliance. And that really, it's determined by a number of factors, including what the GMP inspectors say about the manufacturer. So we don't have a specific frequency in Australia.
Okay, I have a question to Aina in the Q&A. Could you please elaborate more? How does the agency apply risk-based principle to routine surveillance testing for the sample taken from the product license holder? Routine surveillance testing. What's the risk-based approach you are taking? Yeah.
So, okay, I will try to answer this question because because I'm basically based in the laboratory. So we work togetherly and closely with surveillance and complaint section, where this section is responsible for doing the PMS program, where I will try my best to answer the question. So, so basically for the PMS program, the sampling will be conducted on the product during the registration time. Our registration is valid for 5 years. So at least within these 5 years, the product might be sampled for our PMS program. So for in terms of risk-based approach, from what I understand, the section involved will definitely check the history of the products. I think basically it's about the same with TGA, if I'm not wrong, where we see the PMS history of the product, the previous history. This is one of the example, our approach to do the sampling for the product. Beside that, we also do checking on their alert, if there is any alert or any ADR reporting for that product. That is also one of the approach that we do for the sampling for these programs.
That's good. York, its time is up for the panel discussion. So can we close it and move on to the next one? And then I would like to thank you, York, and the panelists, Lisa, Aina, and yourself. And I think it's a great discussion. I know there were a lot more questions in the Q&A, quite a number to NPRA. I'll leave it to the organizers to later to answer that. Thank you very much. Thank all of you. York. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
thank
now, thank you very much.
You.
And
thank
yes,
you.
Thank you very much. Yes. It's closing remarks, and we have about 7 points listed together in the closing remarks. Before I go over that in terms of the time, if I may have to rush at the end, I would like to thank all the 7 speakers for the part 1 and part 2 in the very outset. And then also I would like to thank the great moderators, both Mike and York, in handling all the questions, and then our panelists to answer satisfactorily to my best the knowledge. And I think participants have benefited from there. So taking from the insights shared by the 7 speakers, and also based on the question and answer during the panels, 2 panels after part 1 and part 2, here are some of the concluding remarks that probably can actually we take home. The number 1 is supply chain integrity and resilience are most important components of patient access. Flexibility is needed in supply chain manufacturing and distribution in order to respond to dynamic supply needs. I think we have seen this during COVID, and it has given us great insights and then experience and lessons we have learned from there. The second point is optimizing regulatory frameworks through GMP convergence, aligned inspection processes, and NRA cooperation inspection programs will definitely avoid duplication and redundancy, and facilitating reliable global supply chains that's product supply to patients anywhere, everywhere, globally. Number 3 is mutual trust between all parties in the foundation of is the foundation of reliance. I think mutual trust came, the terms came quite often, and then it really reiterates everything depends on the mutual trust. So that's a very important point. When applying reliance, a mutual understanding of product sameness is critical. Nonetheless, regulatory reliance can always be used as long as essential quality product characteristics are the same. That is talking about the product sameness and how do we approach that. The 4th bullet point is Though oftentimes more than one manufacturing site is used to ensure uninterrupted supply of medicinal product, industries ready have a preliminary discussion with NRAs to highlight any differences of concern and provide the evidence to NRAs decide if such differences have no impact on the quality, efficacy, and safety of the physical product. This is actually communicating with and having an open, transparent discussion and science-based, risk-based discussion with the authorities do help. Next slide, please. The last more remarks is collaboration between NRAs and implementation of reliance on testing from networks of regional control laboratories can eliminate redundant testing and speed up supply and patients. And also, and it actually a judicial use of time and resources as well, and then providing every product to every patient as on a need basis. The next one is risk-based national strategies for control, quality control. It's risk-based, and increased transparency and international alignment will reduce effort duplication through, for example, the granting of waivers. And this is again, and I think we have seen the great application of risk-based approaches during COVID, and then without compromising the safety and efficacy of the product in terms of the COVID vaccine, and also some of the other related products for patient care. This is especially important in the context of pandemics or natural disasters to ensure uninterrupted supply of medicine. The last point is in conjunction with Reliance, a robust post-marketing surveillance system is a key tool in strengthening national quality control strategies without increasing the risk of supply interruption and drug shortages that registration testing may cause. I think what's actually the drug shortages, prevention of drug shortages, supply interruptions, it's a concern for both regulators and industry in my view, and that I think coordinated, collaborated, and efforts, risk-based and confidence-based efforts need to be done in terms of preventing interruptions and drug shortages. That's I think is a very key. And finally,